Without further ado, my name is Michaela O'Connor Abrams. I am CEO of Mocha Plus, and it is my distinct pleasure to be able to moderate a panel of people that I admire tremendously for so many reasons. But if I can start on the opposite end with my dear friend of many years, Joel Turkel of Turkel Design, the owner of one of the featured homes next weekend, the Axiom Desert House, a living lab that is extraordinary and you must see it. And then to his left, somebody you may or may not know, Trina Turk, maybe, who, please go ahead. I didn't want to stop the clapping, Trina. And on this panel, because of her exquisite eye for design, and in my opinion, the person in textiles and fashion who understands why good design is so important in everything that we do. And then to her left is Barton Jenke, who is an amazing architect and also the protege and very importantly a partner of the gentleman to his left, James Tyler. For those of you who do not know this man, and I kind of, when I heard that he was willing to be on our panel, Jim, I was pretty blown away because not only did he run Craig Elwood's office when he was just a little bit younger than he is now, but he is the person I consider one of the last living people, and I don't mean to make you sound ancient, Jim. It's just that there are so few who still have as the vibrancy, the attention to all the work that had been done and still is done with regard to modern architecture and design, and the person who, because introduced to us by the wonderful lady to his left, Diane Bald, who with Michael Budman, where are you, Mr. Budman? He just disappeared. He was standing right there. Is the owner of this house, the Kirk Douglas Estate, and is one of their homes. And so let me start also, Diane, by thanking you and Michael for allowing us to have this entire event here. So, Monogram is a brand in and of itself that stands for all of the principles of good design, and in the last 3 years has done more to really innovate in that category in the industry than any other brand of which I'm aware. So the partnership here is about reimagining the kitchen with Diane and Jim and Barton so that at Modernism 2020, you will all come back and visit us and see the kitchen now done with Monogram. And you didn't say, I hope it's done, did you? Of course it will be done. And otherwise we'll have gorgeous pictures in front of them. No. So anyway, it's wonderful. The topic today, which I hope all of you are interested in, and I want a chance for you to be able also to ask questions should you want to. This is scheduled for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Nobody's running out of the room. Okay. Literally, we really have about 50 minutes to have a discussion about mid-century to the 21st century. What do we take from it? What are the principles that are so important that inform what is good design today? What do we preserve? What do we renovate, rehabilitate? What are the differences, and how did these people see that? What is their lens for that translation over the decades? So my first question really of the panel, and I'm going to start with Jim because, oh, I didn't mean to scare you. But
Not so soon.
Okay. Well, we could start with Barton if that helps, the little soft shoe first. But because you were here first, literally, on the planet, before the people on this panel at that moment, the most important thing, Jim, is you ran Craig Elwood's office, and the eye for everything that was important to bring forth in design then, and then, of course, you go on to design Art Center in Pasadena, among many of your other projects. What was it about modern design of that time that you imagined coming forward? What carried through to today for you in modern design?
Well, I just grew up with modern architecture, but after a long period of time, I had learned more than modern architecture. I learned about the history of architecture. So what you see in Palm Springs is kind of a revolution of what happened in America. We had Gothic revival, we had Greek revival. If it was a bank, it was Greek revival. If it was Gothic, if it was a cathedral or a church, it was Gothic, and so on. So there's this long period where we went through that, so it was a big change. They had to almost turn completely 180 degrees because they were getting rid of everything. You were really throwing out the baby with the bath, because you had to say, what are we going to do? So doing details wasn't like going to Home Depot and buying moldings and things like that, which you can do today, but it was what is the thing that's going to really exemplify what we're trying to do? And a lot of it, and the reason it's so simple, contemporary or modern architecture, as I understood it, was that you were erasing yourself from everything, so you had to come up with all kinds of new concepts, the way people walked through a building, the way they wanted the building to sit on the side, because they had preconceived ideas of what they were going to do. But in modern architecture, if it was a hillside, you couldn't do a Gothic revival building, so you'd say, we're trying to do something that's going to be new. So the details, whether it was doors, door jambs, the way they swing, whether it was a sliding glass door, all of them were designed to say, how can we do it so it's the simplest idea? And so once getting the simplest idea, they graduated to where they could use prefabricated elements. So sliding doors, big glass windows, paneling systems, and all that were the things. So when I got to the office, I had already understood all that because I had studied it in school and worked for another architect. But when I came to Craig's office, we just continued to perpetuate the same kind of ideas. And it became more stringent, I think, once you got into big buildings. It's a lot different than doing houses in Palm Springs or even in Los Angeles. When you get into a big building, is the philosophy still the same? And you have to say yes. But how does it work? A big building is much different. It's very complicated, and it has multi-clients and things like that. So it was really a big study for me, and also kind of trying to, when I got there, to perpetuate the idea of what Craig had done with the houses. And so my role was, what can I do to make this more healthy and to make it more exuberant and to continue to do the ideas that were perpetuated in his early houses. So I was just trying to do what I could to get this continuity that would be perpetuated through all of these other buildings. So Palm Springs, to me, was kind of an interesting thing because it was more relaxed. We were stiffer in Los Angeles, but I'm probably saying too much.
No, this is fabulous. No, this is really, this is great.
But I was, because I could go till sunset.
Okay, well, we're close.
But anyway, I think maybe that answers your question.
Okay.
We were just trying to do the same things. But it was, you don't have to be religious to understand these things, but there was a certain spirit of architecture that you're trying to do. And so what do you say? What's the spirit? The spirit is always based on the truth, because you can argue with a lot of people about it should be this way or that way, but you say, what does it really express the best if you're using a steel, wood, or concrete or whatever, or if you're placing a painting on a wall? Many times you say, well, is it more logical because there's one painting, it's in the middle of the space? Or you could say, no, because you have this wonderful, marvelous machine that God gave you. It's called a brain, and it's related to your eyes. So you can look at it and you can say, it's not good in the middle. It would be more balanced and more realistic if it were kind of over here and down. And then all of a sudden you're basing it on principles, but you're also basing it on the training and the background that you have. And you just don't arbitrarily do that, because I can walk into a room and look at something and it's very bad for me. My wife dislikes me because she says, all you do is look at these things, you don't really like it. You know, first thing you look at is how bad that is. And it's still, after 60 years, the same argument.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is fabulous. I think we're going to go on to Hauser Rudy's marriage with modern architecture and design. A little twist on my questions, but you know, Jim, you said something really elemental to my next question. In what you did when you took over Craig Elwood's office was to bring what then became modern as appropriate for that time in what you were doing, to translate all of the core principles, but also use some of the adjectives about making it warmer, making it more fun, making it, you know, what it should be for the time that you then were running the office. And I think about Barton and what he's doing now. Is it fair to call him your protege, partner, sidekick? No, you think? Okay, not at all. Okay, so Barton, a man of your own right.
Step and fetch.
I would just like to make one point, and then the sun will come down.
Okay.
No, the one point I wanted to make, you were asking about when I went to the office. Craig had done a lot of these houses, and the houses were very contemporary, very modern, and they kind of had what people categorize as the Illwood style or the Illwood look. But when I got there were a lot of the things that bothered me a lot, and so I didn't want to continue those kind of things. One of it was Craig did, see those panels out there? They have black little frames around them. Craig would do the base, the door jamb, back around the door jamb, up around the ceiling. He had a black line that followed him all over the house. And it was, when I first went there, I said, Craig, you just have line-itis. You know, because you just have these things going, you never know where to end. And that became, you know, labor intensive. It was very expensive to do those things. So because we were doing other buildings, I tried to get the idea that you could still articulate the difference between one material and the other. And to define that, you have to really know materials. More than anything, you have to know how materials act. They all have different compressive tension values, all those kind of things. And heat, you know, and cold. But so I was trying to get rid of those things because they were, for me, because Craig wasn't an architect, he was a designer. So I said, I lean more to doing architecture. I am not a designer. As a designer, you say, okay, you're going to do this because it looks good. And Elwood said he admitted that he liked the frames around it, and it looked good. But I said, for me, I'm an architect. I don't design. I just solve problems. And so, regardless of what materials you're using, you go back to the same thing. What is the truth? What is the true expression of how that material works? And so we approached it that way, so that whatever you looked at, you knew how the house got built because it was exposed. You could see exposed ceilings, the decking, things like that, that were in essence really beautiful, and probably the sense of what the spirit of the architecture was. So
Okay.
okay.
All right. No, I'm coming back to you, so
Okay.
save some of it
You
before
have
Sunday.
another point.
Okay. So he's given me about 10 more questions, hasn't he? So Barton, you know, working in your own right as an architect on amazing modern homes and buildings, what, as Jim did with Craig Elwood, what have you done in thinking about the materials of today, the technology we have available today, right? We make use of those as it now translates to good, I'm afraid to say architecture and design in the same sentence now, but as it is good architecture. So what have you done to bring that forward?
Well, first of all, I always am the person that when I step onto a job site with Jim, I tend to be the one who has all the grand big ideas, and the first thing he does is tell me to settle down and why. He asks me why a lot, and I think that is the biggest question that I've always tried to understand. You know, the first time we just finished a house in Crestwood Hill called the Smith House, and it's kind of an erector house up on stilts and all glass. And it was done before Jim came in the office, and we brought him there a few times before we took it on. And he said, you know, I'll do it. And we walked around, and I remember looking at photographs, because I do a lot of research, and that's where I usually go back and find all the archives and work off of that. And that way you can do your best at maybe trying to make it, I don't know, a true representation without, as he would say, making it somebody else's photograph, somebody else's life, you know, somebody else, that was their home, and it's okay because we have these things available to us to go and put a new bathroom faucet in or different things such as that. So he's always taught me that the materials back then were pretty much junk, and they weren't very good, and that's all that was available, and that's what they had to use, was very off-the-shelf mentality. So when you go into adding, you want to define the differences, correct the mistakes, take away the bastardization of the home, and try and add, I don't know, a new, same soul, new life, I guess is what Jim always says to me. So when you look at a recession or a reveal around a wall, he'll correct that because they left him out in a certain part of the building, so Jim will come in and change that. So updating is always good, systems, etc. But he's always one to embrace technology. I mean, he still is way out of the box when we talk about work and about how to incorporate, you know, an HVAC system or sinks, faucets, whatever. And I think that we live in a world of FSC and LEED and certification, and, you know, we're trying to restore something so that it lasts for another 50, 60 years. You know, they've kind of died, a lot of these houses at this point, and had their first incarnation, and they've kind of done what they were meant to do and serve their purpose for someone else's family. So you want to create that new environment that has the same intent and same ability to provide that, but you know, why would we make something that doesn't have something new that's going to help our world last, because we're already destroying everything in so many respects, so why wouldn't we put something new on that's going to be better? So if we can fake it and make it look great, super. But for the most part, I think integrating things is really about, you know, learning how to replace sensitively without ruining the way it looks, but not copying somebody else's photograph. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was someone else's life, so you take whatever's new and slap it on and listen to him and, you know, just take the advice and say it must be okay and let him tell me to settle down half the time. So,
Okay.
it's good.
So I'm going to play off the same, I like this, same soul, new life. Diane. This is one of your modern homes, the Kirk Douglas Estate. And when we think about same soul, new life, as you and Michael came to this house and imagined it being yours, what did you see that you knew that you wanted to preserve, and that what then did you know you wanted to change in order to make it appropriate not only for this time, but for your family?
Well, when we found this house, it was my brother-in-law, Jim Budman, and Michael, and we walked in and we thought, first of all, it had incredible vibes. It still had the vibes of Kirk Douglas and his family. And we know this was a very happy home for 40 years for their family. And there were a couple things that didn't make sense that were still part of the original house, that we felt that we needed to open the house up a little more to allow more light and more visual extension, because to me the whole thing about this house is the indoor-outdoor feeling of it. And so by taking down a couple of walls without ruining the design of it and just opening it up, we feel that we made it a much brighter and livelier space. So we try to really, you know, there's such a fine line when you take an old, fantastic house designed by Wexler, and Gary Wexler is here in the audience, who is Donald's son. And I know we did okay, because when Gary came into the house, he was very heartfelt and a little teary. And he said, if my father could only see what you did to the house, he would have been so thrilled, because it had been very traditional. When the Douglases lived here, it was decorated very traditionally, and it didn't quite carry the spirit of the house. And so we have sort of tried to bring it to this century, but keep the integrity of what the original intention was.
Okay, which then is the perfect bridge over to you, Joel, because having known you as long as I have in your study so many years ago, not quite as many as Jim, but many years of study, and that what you now have in Axiom Desert House is, and please correct me, but it feels like both an homage to modern design of this place, being appropriate for this place, but not only bringing all of the aspects of what's available in materials today, but being so sensitive to making it last. That not only is the design timeless, but the materials and everything you and Milena have built into it really being something that you know can live on a very long time. I mean, what was that like? How did you make sure you too reached that place where it all made sense and fit together?
Well, I think, I was just thinking about some of the things that Jim said a moment ago about, what it meant to create modernism for the first time as designers and architects were kind of establishing a vocabulary and a voice. And in my generation, growing up in the kind of the academic environment that I grew up in, we never really viewed it as modern architecture, we viewed it as good architecture. And modern architecture was taught to us as good architecture. And it was part of a continuum that was made up of a lot of good architectures. And there were some people down the road doing some postmodernist things, but we were focusing on good architecture. And for me, that's always been, I think, personally and within our practice, it's something that's really inspiring, because we identify kind of a series of core principles that were handed down to us by the modernists. And those are, concision, clarity, truth to materials, honesty. Some of the things that Jim was talking about. I really feel that every building has a spirit. Every building deserves to have a voice and be treated with respect and be given dignity. And I think when you allow a building, or you create a building that is kind of embodies a series of strong principles, it's like meeting a person. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with them, if they can articulate their position well and you understand why they hold it, you have a lot of respect for them. And I think that's what we try to do with our design. We try to create something that has a legitimate position, that can answer all of the whys. We don't do anything just because. We don't do anything just because it looks cool. We do things because we know they have inherent value. And there's so many things that we're trying to respond to today. It's not just, adhering to design principles, but it's also recognizing that we have issues of seismicity, and we have issues of, energy efficiency and Title 24, and we want a building to last and, produce its own energy and clean its own air and, shelter and, provide all of that, those good things that Vitruvius wanted us to provide in a building, but also do it in a really elegant, long-lasting way that speaks to how people live today and what the contemporary dwelling expectation is. And it's a lovely synthesis, and I think that that's something that for me that I really love about being a student of modernism and I guess a child of modernism in a way, is that I've been given by my progenitors, I've been given this group of tools and this group of beliefs to follow, and it lets us follow something that has a real integrity, but also make it of today and make it something that responds to the needs of this century and beyond. And so that's always something that we're trying to do, and I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I think it dovetails to everything Jim was talking about honesty and the truth of materials, the truth in the design. Trina, you own at least one that I know of, modern gem of your own. And so one of the reasons I was so excited and we were honored to have you on the panel was because you've translated good design and all that means in the truth of materials and all the things we're discussing about architecture in your design line, in textiles and in fashion. And I'd love to know, we'd love to know, what are those key things that inform what you decide to bring into the next season, and what informs the brand Trina Turk as it regards good design?
Well, I mean, we're very inspired by both Palm Springs and California in general. And I think that a lot of what inspires us is what's happening as far as textiles. And I guess that would be the same as in architecture, where architects are inspired by materials they see, and we're inspired by textiles. And you know, there's a lot of technology happening in textiles the same way there is in architectural materials. And so seeing new textiles and you know, constantly being aware of all the new developments in what's happening in fabric manufacturing is really important to what we do. And as similar to what Jim was saying, I think that the fabric tells you what it wants to be. You know, certain fabrics want to be a floaty dress and other fabrics want to be something more structured. So in that way, I think that architecture and fashion design have that similarity. I also think that as far as modernism goes, the simplicity of modernism is similar to sort of a simple dress where it's about the fabric. It's not really about, you know, the bells and the whistles and the embellishment and the ruffles, and you know, it's usually something. I think a modern, or you know, a modern style would be something that was simple and it was just about the materials.
Okay. You know, when we talk about style, oftentimes we hear people, and those of you who are architects and designers with clients with whom you're working, it's they respond perhaps first to the way something looked, or a picture they saw, or a home they admire, and they're not thinking, or they don't think they're thinking much past the aesthetic, that modern is a style, when we really, and as I think everybody on the panel has spoken about, that modern really is a philosophy about the way in which we live, and the truth of the materials, the simplicity. The fact of the matter is, I think it's much harder to create a magnificent modern piece than it is perhaps in tradition, with finials and crown moldings and the things that cover up a multitude of sins, that there is maybe a greater rigor around the honesty in modern design. So to that end, Jim, I want to come back to you because I know you had another point, at least one more, that you wanted to make. At least, yeah, back to you.
It's your turn. You got a point to make. Go
Yeah. So, and you can make your own point, or I can ask you a question.
I have this dumb thing,
That's okay.
and I don't hear very well, so I
Yes.
didn't quite hear you.
Not a problem at all. So I wanted to come back to you about this entire idea that as you work now on Diane and Michael's home in Malibu, the Craig Elwood in Malibu, what makes you so excited about this many decades later of a house created in truth and honesty and time and materials? What do you see the opportunity in bringing that into this century?
Well, on a serious note, I have to work with a terrible couple of clients and a contractor, and I always have to correct them. They absolutely know nothing about what I'm trying to do. So after that, I have to say, I always loved clients, really. I never had a client that was bad. And whenever you got clients that didn't understand what you were saying,
You fire them.
I tried to have, like, I would try to mother them along, and I would say, okay, I know you haven't done this before, but for the most part, I have to say, I didn't get clients that came and said, Jim, we'd like you to do an early American house. They just knew that wasn't why they were coming there. But sometimes they would kind of get boxed in and say, well, what about this and this, about our master bedroom and so on. And they would say, I want to do it this way. And I would say, okay, let's see how we can come together on this. So it was a lot of education with them and stopping and talking about architecture. What's architecture really about? What are we trying to accomplish in your house? If you do this, every design is based on an idea. It's the most important thing you do. Once you have that idea, every culture is based on an idea. Egyptians were based on the idea of life after death. There was Gothic architecture, it was based on Jesus Christ. All of those things, it's an idea. So you still have an idea if you're saying, we're designing this house, it has children, 4 children or whatever, and we have a kitchen, we want a family room, and you say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We want this to be the most enjoyable experience for you. So your responsibility is to be a teacher. And so when working with these two, you know, and Michael's the slave. He does all the heavy work. But I tease him because but anyway, what you're basically doing is saying, okay, let's do this, this, and this. But with the house that was existing, the most important thing of all was that it is this idea that Elwood and them had about this, how do you express a modern building on the beach? You have this beautiful view of the ocean and so on. So I really didn't have much of a role of changing anything. I was trying to help Michael and Barton and Diane and say, okay, this is probably what they would have done then. And so I was more of an interpreter or a translator. I didn't impose my own ideas. Honestly, I tried to do what I thought was proper in the 50s, what they would have done. Now, a lot of things I found I didn't think were appropriate. Before Diane and Michael's house, there was a couple of other houses we worked on, and there were things that were, really uncomfortably bad. And I don't know why Elwood and them did them that way. Either it might have been for economy. They couldn't afford a better way to do it. I never thought economy was a good excuse for bad architecture. But anyway, when I saw certain things, I would say that. But we found houses, the house in Malibu, Diane and I talked a couple of issues that I never understood why they did them that way. And it had to do with jealousy windows in the bedrooms and that kind of thing. So there didn't seem to me the continuity of how the structure worked. And so it was very beguiling to me. I would sit there and she would bring me a drink and a muffin, and I'd sit there, I'd look up there, and I would say, I have no idea why they did that. And Barton and Diane would say, forget it, Jim, we're doing it the original way. And so I was just trying to be cooperative in that. But it's a beautiful experience. And really, I don't do it that much. I do what I have to do, only by what I said before. I'm an interpreter, or just trying to translate what they would have done then, and just try to be more of a supportive person, and to validate them. I want them to be validated that we're really doing this 1950s house by Elwood, and then if there's something that I think may be a benefit, then I can interject it. But we pretty much, have worked in a very cooperative way. No, it's not your turn. I'm still
I got to just add one thing, because when you work with Jim, Barton and I will be discussing something for an hour and a half, how to work it out, how to do this detail, how to do that. And then Jim will just perk up at the end. He goes, well, this is how you're supposed to do it. I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's as simple as this. And we're sitting there like, why did you listen to us for an hour and a half when you knew the right way the whole time?
I love it. Joel, I'm reminded of an event we did when I was the CEO of Dwell here in '04, and I invited Donald Wexler to be there with us, and he accepted, and I was so excited and blown away about that. And he talked about, specifically as it regards respecting the architecture that you have and bringing it into this time, and he talked about kitchens specifically. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I think you're talking about when he talked about, yeah, if I had this kit of parts, I would have done it differently.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think he was, at the time, my recollection anyway, is that he was saying that you could restore a building slavishly and try to replicate what had been done. But bear in mind, if I had had this kit of parts 40 years ago, I wouldn't have done it that way. So why wouldn't you use this material or try it this way? Which was maybe encouraging to folks here who are in the process of trying to reinvigorate but not restore a mid-century home.
Right.
And have it be more up to date.
It was just, I remember the article that we wrote about the interview with him was really, it helped. People wrote to us and said, oh my God, we feel all of a sudden like we have permission to use the materials of today without in any way insulting or disrespecting the work of Donald Wexler, Kreisel, any of them. And we feel so much better about actually being given that from the person who originally designed these homes.
Well, I hope all those people hired Don to do it for them, but probably not.
That was the hope. Okay, going back to what it is that Diane, you and Michael have learned since working with Jim and Barton. What do you think people who want to do this in homes or have bought a modern gem by any architect for that matter, what would your advice be as to how to relax around it and make it yours, but also really respect the architecture? Because it seems, and we've talked about what a fine balance that is. What are the things that you did that you could help them actually understand and be comfortable with?
I guess it really depends what the project is. In our Malibu house, we're really sort of being diligent in restoring a little gem that was done in '57 and really try and keep it as authentic as possible. Whereas this house, where there had been so many reiterations of it, we just sort of, I always like to think of what would the architect, what would he have done, or what would she have done at present day, and sort of to continue and keep it as timeless as possible and not make a mockery of the design and use authentic materials and pick sort of, for this house, pick details that you think are the most beautiful and relevant and try and really accentuate those. So this house, even though it's not authentic to what Wexler had originally designed, I think it's in the spirit of him, and I think he would have been happy with what we've done here.
Quick, you, Barton, you had something you wanted to add to that.
So the house in Malibu is quite an interesting project because of the fact that we have, we're going to be landmarking the house and putting it on the National Register in the process of that now. And when I bring historians through the home who are going to write on it and such, what I've learned is that common spaces usually always have to remain the same in visual and also kind of the reinterpretation, but yet functioning items and rooms such as bathrooms and kitchens. I mean, I've literally been told, Cory Buckner, who basically redoes all the Quincy Jones houses in Crestwood Hill, said kitchens and baths are up for grabs. Those, because we live in a real world. So you look at a kitchen, and in Malibu, we were fortunate enough to get all the furniture back, the plans, the blueprints, everything. So we can make the same house. We have all the original materials from the first two houses that we redid, so that'll go on the house. So it'll be basically the original house. But you look at, here we go, Monogram, and they make a cooktop. The original kitchen in there was Hot Point, which is GE. It was a range. It was stainless steel. Fortunately, GE GE decided to produce a cooktop that's stainless steel. It has rings on it. So you're able to almost transition into that and still sort of keep the same aesthetic. So it's new and functions better. Diane likes to cook. You can't do it on 2 burners and a warmer. You know, it's just not going to happen. So you do want to incorporate, but, you know, kitchens and baths are up for grabs. And I think that, you know, just to throw one more thing, simple's hard. I think we go back to that real quick, and material's material, you know, and that's you. Anyway.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
and I'm really sensitive to that people are starting to turn a shade of blue, in addition to the people wearing a blue shirt. So I would like to close with and then also invite you to, they're not going to be sequestered in a room, they're going to be here as we all enjoy some cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Leave with, we asked Jim Tyler to do something that he'd not done before. And that was to show us your inspiration, use what you have learned over all these years, and design for Monogram a column design for their refrigerator freezer that will be incorporated into the new kitchen that will debut here in 2020. So we'll see some of those renderings. I thought you were about to look at me like, no, I did this before, and then I was going to look like an idiot. But Jim, thank you. What if we could close with, you did that really brilliantly and more quickly. I mean, Monogram was saying to me, you know, how many months do you think it will take? And I said, next week. He's unbelievable and a prolific designer. When you went to do the drawings that we will see tonight and in blown up, hopefully not too pixelated, we were trying to make sure they were large enough for you to see. What did you did it so quickly? I mean, is it just because you've done it and been inspired so intuitively and innately so long that came so quickly? How did you do that? Yes.
I don't get inspired very much.
Okay.
So,
those inspiration boards you
I'm
sent me.
I'm a very practical person, because I look at things and I say, this should be this way, this should be that way, and that. I'm not Frank Gehry. I'm not the kind of person that says, I'm going to do this and create in my mind something that's very abstract and so on, because I'm more of a program architect. So I have to get all the information. If it's a house, I want the clients to tell me everything they want. So I gather all of this information. So I'm not the kind that first meeting I sit down with Diane and I say, okay, I think the house should look like this, and then show some sketches, like people say on the back of an envelope, you know, but I was just never that way. I was more just, how do we solve these problems? And but how do you do it beautifully? The clients are the most important to me, so I used to say, I want you to be happy. I want the kids to be happy. When I design a school, I want the kids to walk through that school and really enjoy it, and say, get up on Monday morning after a nice weekend, say, I can't wait to get to school, because I just love to be there. That's what you want people to feel like. So in designing a refrigerator, you know, as I said, I'm not a creative person, but I'd had to turn to something that, well, to me, the word creation is very strange for a lot of people. I have my own definition, and that is, I never use the word create, because creation, if you think about it, was when God created the earth, they said the word actually means to organize. And so what I always thought I should do is to organize, to get all of these things together. And that was the creation. So in thinking about the refrigerator, I'm going to get to the refrigerator in a couple of minutes. But the refrigerator was more, what can you do that's really part of modern architecture? And the material that has been everlasting has been glass. And so I said, right off the bat, I was thinking of how you could get it to this idea of where it's very, very simple, and unobtrusive, sitting in a room or so on. But what if it had to be a big thing, sitting in a kitchen, and sometimes it just gets bigger and bigger. So you say, what is that material? So right off the bat, I thought glass would be the best material. So I thought if you could design a refrigerator and make it so it's transparent so that you could see food inside. So I did a little frame around it, and then you could see in and you could see the food. But it was kind of translucent glass so that you can't see the bad food or you can't see the mess, but it was just, you had some spiritual feeling is, what is this object? It's a refrigerator because it houses food. And so I was thinking of glass, and then I thought it can be reflective, it can be transparent, it can be translucent, or it can be opaque. So if you had a kitchen where all the accessories were red or blue, or the wife said, I love blue, I want everything blue or whatever, then you could say, okay, you can still use glass, you can paint the back of the glass, and they have a material in architecture that they use, and they use it in high-rise office buildings. And so you can use that kind of glass, but you can use any color you want, and you could move it into any kind of kitchen where you wanted to use the same kind of colors as a contrast or a balance, or maybe use it with an oven and other items that would be designed along with the refrigerator. But the key was simplicity, not seeing a lot of handles, but I was using buttons, and that's so you couldn't see them. So the doors would open themselves, and then the glass you had the balance of using it any way you wanted. If you wanted to use it translucently or transparent, or if you wanted to make it a color, and then you would use that painting the back of the glass or something. In architecture, they call it spandrelite, but spandrelite is a panel that they use very much in architecture. But anyway, I thought you could use it that way.
Okay.
So that was the concept.
Excellent. Well, we have the
See,
inspiration
that's not
board.
very creative.
I think I just beg to disagree. I think it's organized, but creation. And we have Jim's inspiration boards and the things that helped inform the design that will take place. And so with this, if there's anybody who has a question other than, may I please go to the bar and then have something to eat? I wanted to be able to allow any of you to ask a question of any of the panelists now, or if you'd like to just do that over your cocktail, we can do that too. But this has been an extraordinary opportunity with 5 pretty incredible people who, all of whom celebrate good architecture and good design. And I loved when it was, Joel, when you said that it wasn't about modern architecture, it was just good architecture. And I think we all agree.
I have a comment. I gotta say something very
Okay.
Joe, I came out here and Jim Budman brought me to the Axiom House, and I hope that all of you take the opportunity to go and visit this home. We start off with mid-century into the 21st century, and I do believe that you definitely have encompassed that because, I think the case study program, which came about from John Intenza back, in the 40s and 50s through Arts and Architecture magazine, was always about embracing new technology. And there was a kind of, I don't know, what is the word, a quid pro quo. You give it to me, I put it in, we all enjoy it, we embrace technology. And I think that your home exemplifies that because you've taken everything new and made mid-century go to the 21st century, basically. So I hope that everyone takes the time to go see the Axiom House. It's extremely impressive. When I saw it, there was no pool, there was concrete everywhere, and like in a month and a half, this guy's thrown this house together. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So it's very tasteful, and the
I see
materials.
his wife shaking her
amazing.
head.
So
Yeah.
My wife
but,
actually
yeah,
did it all.
exactly. But I had to compliment because it really
Thank you.
does
That's very
exemplify
sweet.
what this is all about: the mid-century aesthetic and embracing new.
So thank you, Joel, Trina, Barton, Jim, Diane. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Really wonderful. So please enjoy.